Hello, welcome to this Windows Server 2016 preview jumpstart. It's good to have you. Thank you for joining us.
It's sunny and not raining in Redmond, which is the trend this summer.
Yes, but we are in this box for the next 3 or 4 hours today, and then the next 3 or 4 hours tomorrow. So make sure you can join us on both days. What are we going to cover? Well, we'll get to an agenda in a minute. We've got a load of stuff. We've 6 or 7 modules over the 2 days. But who are we? Who are you going to be listening to over the next 2 days? Well, a bit about me. I'm Matt McSpirit, technical evangelist for all of our data center technologies. So Windows Server, System Center, Operations Management Suite, Azure Pack, Azure Stack. So if it goes on in the data center, it's pretty much my game. I'll play with that. And today, I'm going to take you through a lot of the content around what's new in Windows Server 2016 in the preview. Now, you'll have a chance to ask questions as you go. You can answer them yourselves if you want as well. But you'll have a chance to ask questions using the Q&A, and we'll try and get to them as much as we can. We've got a team of helpers who are going to help answer those questions as best they can as well. But any that we don't answer today or tomorrow, we'll get back to you on a blog in the next week or so. So don't worry, we will answer your questions. We'll probably do that with the really hard ones that even Corey can't answer. They've got to be tricky questions for that. But exactly.
Essentially, the Q&A becomes your work list for the next 6 months, right?
6 months, maybe even more than that. Yeah, that's my list of things to do.
Help give Matt job security. Ask difficult questions.
Thank you. Thanks very much. Anyway, so these sessions, these kind of jump starts, it's great for me to speak to you. I really enjoy doing it, but you can't do it on your own. You need somebody with you who's got huge amount of expertise, hands-on experience, years of time in the data center spent tinkering and playing with things and really understanding how the technology works. So
and you guys searched extensively for someone like that, didn't you?
Well, just hang on.
Oh, sorry. Okay.
This person is has to be one of a kind, and they really need to be that person who can just help you understand.
If you need me, I'll be in the basement.
And unfortunately, that person was busy, so we've got Corey Hines.
There you go.
Corey Hines is with us.
Can you feel the love?
Yeah, I'm only joking. He's been stitching me up right on till coming on air. So it's so Corey, tell us a bit about you for people who don't know you, and the trick is to keep it under 140 characters.
Oh dear God. Well, for the record, I used Twitter for the first time last night.
We saw.
I know.
Your follower let us know.
So anyway, my name is Corey Hines. I'm the architect and CEO for a company called Learn On Demand Systems. We're a data center. We do all the stuff that we had talked about and that we're going to be doing in this jumpstart. Primarily, we host for training companies, hands-on labs, demos, et cetera. We have a platform that leverages a lot of the technologies that Windows Server uses, especially some of these new converged networking, virtualization, storage technologies. I'm an MVP for Hyper-V. I've been working with virtualization products going back to, the 60s, I guess. Maybe.
60s.
And I'm joking. Probably going back about 15 years or so. Mainly doing Hyper-V, VMware, storage infrastructure, networking infrastructure, and all the things related to that. So a lot of the stuff that we're going to cover in here. Yep. This is, I love this content. This is exciting for me.
Thank you.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
So we're kind of keen to get started. Now there's, for those of you that are kind of following along at home, we're going to do a lot of things in here. The focus is on what's new in Windows Server 2016, but we're also going to cover some of the stuff that's already there to a degree to make sure it's foundational. It's very difficult to talk about storage spaces direct without knowing kind of where we came from. Now that being said, the focus is on what's new. There's a ton of content out there that is on some of the existing technologies. For me, this is my third jumpstart on Windows Server products. The first 2 were on Windows Server 2012, 2012 R2, and you can kind of go back on MVA and look up some of those. Myself and your colleague Rick, who's abandoned the data center for the cloud, apparently. I know. I don't know.
We wash our hands of him.
Exactly.
His cloud thing. What is that all about?
He's gone. We've got a significant upgrade in my server jumpstart partner.
Wow, I'm blushing. Thanks.
So we're going to be looking at, you can go back and look at those, get a lot of the foundational technologies, and then we're going to focus here on what's new and brand new in Windows Server 2016. There's a lot in Hyper-V, there's a lot in storage, there's a lot in networking. Particularly for me, storage is a world I play in a lot. I'm pretty excited about some of the things that are going to be coming up in storage. For virtualization, we've now got container technology. This is probably one of the first big sort of net new scenarios for Hyper-V in a while. We've got a whole module dedicated to container technology, so we're pretty keen to get started here.
Now, before we go through the agenda, I'm intrigued about this photo because to me it looks like you've taken an old school CRT monitor on like a hot air balloon or something. So what is going on there? You look incredibly happy about it.
It is fun, actually. So that is a shout out to my buddy Ward Ralston.
Oh, right.
That's actually Andy's sailboat. So that's not a CRT monitor. That's actually an advanced GPS navigation system.
That was my second guess.
Yes, that would have been. And that was right before the freighter almost killed us.
But you can't resist wearing the branded gear.
No, I cannot.
Branded clothing. Excellent. Well, there we go. So that's a little bit about us. Hopefully that gives you an insight into just who we are and what we've been doing and what we're going to focus on in the course. And as Corey introduced, we have a jam-packed agenda. We're going to start today with a quick intro, just to help set context, not necessarily on where we've been, but more so about the investment areas we're making, where Windows Server fits in our overall strategy for the data center, how we're bringing learnings from Microsoft Azure into the platform to really benefit you and your organization and your infrastructures. But then we're going to dive into 3 key areas that are very heavily related today. So server virtualization, many of you will be familiar with Hyper-V, I'm sure. So we'll talk about some of the new capabilities there, and Corey's going to demo a lot of that stuff as well.
There's some really nice new things in Hyper-V.
Yes, exactly.
Just fun and cool. I giggled immensely when I started playing with this new build and some of the things that are in there. We just kind of go, why haven't we had that all along? It's so useful. So we'll see a lot of that.
So we'll see some of that, and then as Corey mentioned, we'll go into storage and look at some of the cool stuff, both where we've come from, because our story in 2012 and especially in 2012 R2 is really solid, and it's got some excellent capabilities that can really help you realize big benefits within your data center.
So Matt and I were sitting in his office yesterday while he was trying to figure out what DNS does, and we're kind of having a little conversation. We're kind of in a conversation about the role of a Windows admin today versus the role of Windows admin, several years ago.
Yesteryear.
And the role of a Windows admin, traditionally has always been, hey, I want to manage Windows Server, users, groups, permissions. But when it comes to storage and SAN, that's the storage guy that does all that. When it comes to switching and fabrics, that's the network guys that do all that, and that's changing now. Storage is now something the Windows guy can do and the Windows guy can control. You no longer need an elaborate amount of expertise in third-party SAN products and fiber channel switching and even iSCSI. You can now build full-on file server clusters with disks in the box, with direct attached storage. And it's fully replicated, fully redundant, full parity. And we'll show you how to do that. But some of these things are really taking areas of infrastructure that traditionally didn't fall under the umbrella of the what's the word I'm looking for? The traditional Windows Server admin, or the stereotypical, that's the word I was looking for.
The MCITP type.
Yeah, exactly. But now, storage is part of that. And one of the things I've often encouraged people as we have conversations about this is there's kind of a new role evolving in the Windows Server world, which is the idea of a fabric administrator. So you can now use Windows and System Center to manage storage, networking, compute, the fabric that services and service layers run on top of. So kind of open your mind a little bit for some of these topics.
And as an IT professional, it really helps you to build your skills, and expand them from being a Windows Server focused professional, just focus on the core AD and those core services that Corey touched on, and branch out into those additional areas, and you become infinitely more valuable to your organization or any other organization you may choose to join in the future. So that's the focus for today, is compute or virtualization, storage and networking, really get that groundwork laid for tomorrow, where we look at some more of the advanced stuff. So if we see here, day 2 in the morning, first thing, same time, same place, we're going to introduce Nano Server. So here you go. Corey's rubbing his hands. We may even hear him giggle. Nano Server is a complete refactoring of Windows Server and changes the way we deploy Fabric. So it builds on what we learned today, and also at the guest layer. And that leads us nicely into the introduction of Windows Server and Hyper-V containers. So we'll spend a little bit of time on both of those, and then we'll wrap up the day focusing on some of the automation, PowerShell workflow, DSC, because I realize that a lot of IT professionals out there, whilst they know PowerShell, they don't necessarily combine it together in such a way that they're embracing these advanced workflows, and more specifically, infrastructure as code through things like DSC.
Yeah, there's a trend away from writing scripts into writing more declarative models, right? If you're looking at what Azure doing with the Azure Resource Manager, with PowerShell DSC, you don't need to worry about how to get there, you worry about what you want. And the software figures out how to get there. So learning how to define what you want in such a way that Windows can simply say, oh, I know what I need to do to get you there, let me go do it. Funny story about NanoServer, though, before we even start. It has I discovered a really useful use for NanoServer.
Right. Just one?
Well, one sort of out of the box, which is your kids.
Right.
So like I showed my kids are somewhat technically savvy because they're my kids, and I force it on them like you wouldn't believe. But if they don't do their homework, I threaten to replace their desktop with NanoServer. And
wow.
All of a sudden, they do their homework very quickly.
Excellent.
It's fantastic.
I may try that on my wife's machine.
You let me know how that goes.
See how we go there, yeah. So that's the agenda. Let's kick off. Let's go for Module 1. A quick introduction, help you understand just what we're doing in this space, what's going on in the infrastructure in the data center before we dive into virtualization. So this one shouldn't take long, just a few minutes, just help you set the scene. And we think about, when we're investing in the technology, we think about the kind of problems that people are facing, the kind of challenges, the kind of industry trends that are taking place. And there's a lot of industry trend around shadow IT, for instance, where users within your organization they may be, and you may not even know it at this point, they may be circumventing IT and going to use cloud services directly with their credit cards because perhaps IT isn't providing the services they need fast enough or the right services they need. And there's a lot of process that's involved for these perhaps developers to get what they need quick, and they can do it faster in the cloud by just providing their credit card. So for instance, going straight to Azure or AWS or other popular cloud services. So shadow IT is becoming a real problem. So the only way to provide a solution for that for IT is to provide the services that developers and end users need at the speed they need it. And that's hard. And you can't do that with legacy technology. So we're really investing in technology in this release of Windows Server in 2016 and System Center and the Azure Stack that enable you to provide services and capabilities to your end users and tenants, if you will, at the speed they need. You think about, okay, why are people looking at agile alternatives? Why is investment in apps growing so much quicker? And they're all related. If you think about applications that are being deployed now, microservices, they require a change and a different approach to developing applications and a different platform to run on. But you as IT have to support in your platform the traditional applications and workloads that run today and potentially embrace this new generation, this next generation of applications and workloads. So with Windows Server and System Center and the Azure Stack, we're providing a platform as we go forward that can really meet the demands of the fabric, the infrastructure, provisioning new servers, storage, and networking in a software-defined manner. And then on top of that, a platform for the services that your users and developers need to consume. And when we look at some of the comparisons between today's data centers and a North Star for Microsoft in terms of a data center is Azure, operating at hyperscale. But if you think about how that data center operates and how when you deploy applications and the type of hardware you use and how it's focused on continuous integration and rapid deployment of applications and workloads, it's very different from what we classify as perhaps a traditional data center. So when you think about you going to Azure and you say, I need a new virtual machine, next, finish, it's done. All the automation takes care of that deployment, and under the covers, new networks are spun up to connect your workloads. There's not some person there with a cable just waiting for you to click submit, and they're running around the data center ready to plug that cable in and connect it to another and assign VLANs. And that just doesn't happen in an Azure scale data center. It's too manual. So we need the standardized processes, the automated configurations to really enable that to operate at hyperscale. When it comes to hardware, Microsoft in Azure data centers is using standard x86 hardware, commodity hardware, where x86 standard servers with storage, direct attached storage, local storage, and enabling and transforming through software into a redundant, high-performance storage backend for your key workloads. And from networking perspective, we're utilizing things like network virtualization to really drive agility within the environment. So all of that combines into a very compelling package to embrace, and that's why we see that shadow IT. It's so quick and so easy to use.
So I mean, I can kind of relate to some of that. Within our own platform and our own solutions, we don't use big complex storage infrastructure, big complex network infrastructure. The goal has always been to make it as simple as we can possibly make it. Mm-hmm. And so, for example, we many years ago did away with Fiber Channel, and we did only SMB-based storage. For our servers, we used very low-spec commodity hardware. but we use a lot of them, and we use disks in the boxes in many cases because we get, at the end of the day, net better performance. And and we're, I know it's not Azure impressive, but we're approaching the 20 million VM deployment mark any day now. We'll cross 20 million VMs deployed in the last couple of years. Machines. It's roughly one every 6 or 7 seconds.
Wow.
So it's this ongoing thing.
That's on the lab platform.
Yeah, and we do it, on commodity hardware as well. So
yeah, so that's a good example, a great example, and a traditional data center is very different from that. It has very specialized hardware, very specialized storage and networking components, and that makes it difficult in some cases for configuration, for ongoing management and maintenance. And as Corey said, we want to make it as simple as possible, because if it needs to scale and needs to be automated and efficient as that, Azure's a good example of how we're doing that at scale. And we're bringing those learnings to your data center. So for instance, if we look back through historically at the previous releases of Windows Server and System Center being our management platform for managing the on-premises infrastructure traditionally, back in Windows Server 2008, we introduced Hyper-V, Virtualization, and System Center as a broad suite of tools that enable you to manage that infrastructure. But push forward to 2012, and this was a monumental release that introduced huge levels of scalability, performance for Hyper-V, really introduced some key features, some of which we'll talk about today from a Hyper-V perspective, and really pushed just what you could include in the box with Windows Server, and gave organizations a great stepping stone to virtualize the compute layer, virtualize the storage layer, and virtualize the networking layer. And that was enhanced still further in 2012 R2, where some more of the components came in, and again, we'll look at those a bit later on.
To me, some of the biggest changes with 2012 and 2012 R2 were on the storage stack.
Yeah.
When you introduce the notion of an application file server, so that we can now run application workloads with persistent file handles over SMB, and SMB has been built up to, to emulate some of the functions of what we would traditionally find in fiber channel storage, like multipath, and some of those redundancy items. It was a game changer, because all of a sudden your Windows skill set could be used to deploy very complex, very high performance, very robust storage infrastructures. And for me, that was a significant game changer, because now a virtual machine, which is ultimately a workload, can go anywhere at any time in any way without any downtime. And the flexibility you get from that, the way you get to now rethink how you operate becomes absolutely awesome. And gone are the days of walking into, I remember years ago walking into companies, and they talk about, the server for the department. And, those days are well and truly behind us. It's no longer the server, it's the application that we talk about when we think about it. And, people are slowly beginning to embrace this, but, it takes a while.
Yeah, absolutely. And that infrastructure, that infrastructure based on 2012 R2, Windows Server and System Center, it took a lot of influence from Azure and what we were doing in Azure, the Hyper-V layer, some of the networking capabilities, the storage design principles. But as we go forward, we really are embracing still further that infrastructure and app platform, that cloud-first innovation, and bringing that synergy and that consistency, more specifically, between Azure and Windows Server 2016 and System Center 2016 to your data center. So in this next wave of releases, so Windows Server, System Center, you'll see that the synergy between the Azure platform and the on-premises infrastructure technologies are closer than ever, specifically bringing functionality, actual code down on-premises into your data center that you can use, that's been battle tested at scale, that's been running in the Azure data centers, but you're able to use it within your environments running Windows Server and System Center. So that's really compelling. You don't necessarily need to use Azure to benefit from it, but the hybrid infrastructure is becoming more and more prevalent as we go forward as well. And to lay that out on a slide in a more of an infrastructure and component way, you'll see what we're doing in this space. So on premises on the left, we've got something called the Microsoft Azure Stack.
Now there was at one stage the Windows Azure Pack.
Correct,
so
yes.
This is the next evolution of Windows Azure Pack.
Yes, right? Powered by Windows Server, System Center, and Azure technologies. So for instance, the portal, a lot of the PaaS v2, a lot of the IaaS platform, a lot of Azure code now running on premises. And you'll see us refer to that in multiple times over the two-day course. We'll talk about it in networking, we'll talk about it in storage and compute, and tomorrow when we talk about nano and containers and so on, there's so much synergy. But this Azure Stack is powered by Windows Server, System Center, and these core technologies. And on top of that fabric, as we talked about earlier, you've got this platform for your tenants, or for you as IT to provide your tenants with services, PaaS services like websites or other PaaS services IaaS, so virtual machines, other workloads. And these can be Windows Server based, they could be Linux based, they could be VMs, they could be containers. There's all sorts of combinations you can run on this powerful fabric. So today when we talk about Windows Server, and tomorrow as well, some capabilities are exclusive to Windows Server and Azure Stack. Some are only in the Azure Stack, so we'll make sure that we talk about that as we go forward as well. But you'll see that the innovation, the platform, the consistency across on-premises and Azure, they're like one. So it really enables you a lot of benefit if you do choose to embrace the cloud going forward. If not, you just know that you're benefiting from hyperscale, battle-tested infrastructure components that have been brought on premises for you.
It's a bit of a switch. I mean, if you go back, many years ago from Microsoft, it was deploy it, and then the big companies learn the hard way. Microsoft learns from the big companies, and then everyone else benefits. Yep. Now it's Microsoft beats itself up. Learns deploying Azure, and then companies benefit from all those learning. So these this notion of wait for the service pack. It's just not relevant anymore.
No, not as relevant. I mean, there's certainly scenarios where Microsoft will work with large organizations, customers, big and small, for specific scenarios, because Azure it's a big beast, and it's also got specific scenarios that we can benefit from learnings and bring those on premises. But there's also scenarios that will be exclusive to on-premises service providers or SMBs and so on. And so the learnings come from different places and can influence future versions of the products. And what you'll find, and we'll reference this in some of the slides as well, particularly in storage and networking, where we are innovating in new and different areas, is the Windows Server group and the teams are using a platform called User Voice, where you can request new stuff. I want it to do this, I want it to do that. I need Windows Server storage to do this, or I need System Center Virtual Machine Manager to do that. And the product team are listening, and there have been instances, particularly in System Center, where a direct feature that's come in an update roll-up has been as a result of somebody or multiple people raising that in a User Voice.
I can vouch for that directly, because there are 2 or 3 things I can point to in both 2012 R2 and Server 2016 that I can say I asked for that.
Right.
Now, I don't know if I was the only one or not, but I know in at least
just kept voting.
Well, I know in at least one case I was the only one, because it was a really, really obscure thing, and they just kind of did it for me.
Right.
But just a little parameter thing on an API thing way, way deep down. It's like, if you just did this somewhat, anyway. So
yeah, you've got friends in high places.
I do, but they do listen. That's the point.
Exactly, and that's the key point. Yeah, that's the takeaway. So when we flash up that at the end of the slides, and you'll have it on the slides that you'll be able to download as well at a later point, you'll have the links to the User Voice. But even if you just do a search for User Voice for Windows Server, you'll find that. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of context. There's this fabric notion where we're pushing software-defined infrastructure to provide an agile, responsive, resilient platform that's high performance, that can enable you to virtualize traditional workloads and the next generation of workloads, containers, cloud-based applications, distributed apps, and place them either on premises or have the consistency to be able to move those workloads off into the cloud, whether that's an Azure-based cloud or consistency with a service provider who can also provide those kind of services. So that wraps up that particular module. So the introduction module, hopefully you found that useful. We just wanted to set the scene with where Windows Server fits in our overall strategy going forward, and how it's taken a lot of learnings from Microsoft Azure. And in the next module, we're going to take a look at server virtualization in Windows Server 2016. So make sure you join us then.
We'll be back in about 10 minutes. See you then.